And so, still looking in the book of Freedom and Righteousness, its Inheritance and Actuality by Rune Engelbrecht Larsens, a Danish author and intellectual, whose books have inspired me to look deeper into and make a revision of my thoughts back in the days. And in this chapter, we're still following his presentation of Athena. In the first chapter, he had made a presentation of the basic idea of freedom and how it was understood and the difficulties surrounding it. And in the second chapter, he talked a bit about something more local, Danish, and then he came to the idea of Athena as the basic idea of the state, that the light tower. And I spoke about that in a former video, how Athena was understood and built up and what kind of values it was built on. And in this same chapter, he goes on to talk about the opposition to that ideal state of freedom, and where people can be citizens and most most likely just join the Athenian community. And the most and biggest opponent of that was Plato, even though he was part of it, and he uses Socrates, that is a very discussed figure in history and a uh, great speaker and learner, and he died. You can call him a kind of a martyr for his beliefs. Took the poison with the wine and slept slowly in, and he had his last speech, and he had that condemnation of him because he opposed that type of society, and he wanted a different type of society that you could call the philosophical vision of an ideal state. It's like the philosopher's wisdom and rule that's gonna control everything. And this is what's this part of the chapter is about. What is these ideas that Plato had put forward, and why do they, in some extent, oppose and criticize the idea of liberty and freedom as a way to tyranny? And that could sound very strange, because don't we all need freedom and want it and support it? And that's also part of looking into this book exactly as I like it. It's not a book that just puts freedom on a pink cloud in the sky, but also says, well, there has been another options, and he's not so fond of this option. It's clearly to see, but it is there, and maybe that's what have inspired Christian and Islamic ideologies in modern days. And maybe they don't have that big voice yet, but perhaps they will, or they are at least trying to build some kind of picture of the modern rule on maybe some of these old ideas. So let's go through what Plato is saying, and using the voice of Socrates and other people around him. And it's basically based on the book of the state and the laws that Plato has written, or they say he has written. That's what we have gotten through history. And we must always take a notion that history can be a bit distorted or being rewritten, or people who have translated have added something of their own ideas. It's like I'm talking here. This is not the exact words of the author. Neither is the author's words about these sources totally exact, because they are mixed in a context of his own, and it will give you a certain idea. So we must always be a bit critical to the sources that we have gotten through to us through history, especially if they are 3,000 years old like these ones. So we cannot 100% be sure, but the idea stands, because it's an idea that's opposing democracy and freedom as a way to tyranny. So what is it all about? I'm gonna look into it in this talk. The basic idea is the idea of justice and righteousness, and realization of people's life according to that. And the trouble with freedom, Plato and Socrates and Aristophanes and their group will say, is that it will lead to tyranny. How can that be? That's because it will open up for the egoism in people, and that egoism will lead people to want more and more of the freedom, especially for themselves and those around them. And that could turn into a kind of oligarchy, because they would use the system to own benefit that group and those people. And so the freedom would be misused, and in the end will become a kind of tyranny of the ego and tyranny of the people who are ruling, and you will not be able to control them, not even with that kind of bringing them to be responsible for their will. So what they really are saying is they are fearing tyranny, and they are fearing the suppression and the injustice. Society will be the outcome, and has been the outcome in the time of the Athenic society. They're saying this is a false idea, and so we need something that is more true, and with truth comes righteousness, and with righteousness there is an idea of truth behind it. So many people have called Plato and that idea as a revolutionary conservative theocracy, or an idea that builds on the one God and the one voice of the law that is the truth, and that will distribute righteousness. And from that righteousness, people can live under its rule, divided into different layers and groups according to what they are good at, and according to what they can do of society of good for society. So it's the one true idea in a kind of religion and authority that is gonna build the secure and safe society, free of that tyranny of freedom they were so opposed to in that time. And so the idea is in many ways idealistic, and maybe in many years also when I read it, and I can see that the author as well has this notion, and Karl Popper has taken that understanding as well, that the idea can become totalitarian, and it's like okay, you're using truth and righteousness to impose a totalitarian state where the truth can do what it like, and it's only your truth. What about the truth of other people? And Plato, to go back to his ideas in this presentation, says that, well, it's not about the many truths. It's about there is one truth that binds us all, and the common good is the more true way of serving society. So whenever the freedom of the individual is opposed to the freedom of the many or the society, and whenever your interests is in opposition to the interest of the many and the majority, then you will have to adhere to that and go under it, and it will have its priority, because that's the most important thing. And the danger about, as he says, that the liberties in freedom, and when people are going to choose their leaders, well, these people will use democracy to become great in themselves, and they will cheat and say lies to appeal to the public and to get the majority voices, and they will be very selfish in trying to get what they want, even though it's not for the public good, and they won't speak the truth, and they won't be criticizing neither themselves or their political stance or their achievements, because they want to get the voices of the many. And so they will be in a way demagogues. They will be regular tyrants, and these persons who will lead will stick to power and try to gain it and get it, and they will be ready to proclaim war to unfold that. And so that democracy, built on that notion of freedom that's not realistic in the ideas of Plato, it will become tyranny. There is no doubt in his eyes about that. And he says it's like that king that challenged the god Zeus, and when he want to show his strength and he want to show what he's capable of to get power, he killed a human. And by killing that human, he was transformed into the wolf and lost everything. And that's what will happen to democracy. It will become the like the animal that will devour its own people, because it will tap into their egoism. It will tap into what they want to hear, and it will take them to a place where power will be more and more concentrated in the hands of those who are lusting for power and want to take over. And so in that way, we need another kind of system. They say it's the godly order and the natural order of man. And what's that? It's the order of the wise men, the philosophers, the people who can rise in their spirit and minds to become those people can see are wise and clever and do things for the main good, and they should be the ruler level, and there should be a law that upholds everyone under it, equal to the law, and there will be a godly rule in a way that everybody must and have to adhere to, and that godly rule will be publicly known for everyone. And what will the others do? Well, part of them will be soldiers, because they will be the people who protect that society and that justice, soldiers and maybe police, if we can say it in modern ways. And the other part will be workers and tradesmen and people who are, like in a way, giving society what it needs. And they build that notion on the idea that people and societies are like a human. You have the head, and that's the minor group, that's a minority. Then you have the body and you have the legs, and the soldiers are the legs and the hands, those who will protect you and help you. And the body, it's all the productive people in it, the tradesmen and the workers and the people with handcrafts and everyone who can in a way support and help society. They are the body. And then the head, it's the small clever group of wise people who will be given the right to rule. That would be the ideal state, because these people will be able to look through egoism and will be in a way wise in their decisions for the common good. And in that sense, they say, well, these wise men are actually adherent to a higher law, a godly law, and that law is only from one source, and that is only one truth in it. And so they will also reject all these false gods that has been surrounding the state and the ideas of Athena. And they will say that the poets are a threat to that kind of notion, because they will fabricate lies and they will misuse the power of joy and enjoyment in people to maybe fill them up with ideas that's not worth it, and that will lead them astray and maybe feed their egoism against the adherence to that law, and to that natural state of some people, like having a lot of power, and others working together. But I guess this is my comment into this, that Plato and Socrates wouldn't agree seeing it as a hierarchy, but they will say it's three layers that's working together and all adhere under the same law of righteousness. And when you have righteousness, well, nothing can go wrong, because it is only right to protect your head more than the arms and legs, and it's only right to protect some parts of the body more than you protect the head, and then the head will be a servant of the body, and the body will be a protector of the hands and legs, because they all need each other and will cooperate with each other. So I do not totally agree on that hierarchical view of these things, that it would lead to that kind. But the problem is it's an utopia. It's a kind of idea that just say, well, you build the state on the notion of truth, and when you know the truth and you know the godly order, you will know what's right. And when you know what's right, people will just find the balance in that and understand it and live under it. And that's much better than living under the notion of freedom that is false and not really coming through, because as mentioned earlier, people will be misusing it and will be taking over to use their own to expand their own egos. And so these oligarchies that will be taking over will turn democracies into tyranny. And when democracy fails, it will fail, they say, and it will go that way where the egos cannot be satisfied anymore. And so the egos of the strongest will be satisfied by cheating and manipulating the people to follow the notion of, I will give you what you like and I will give you your freedom to the biggest extent. While they know that's not true, they will feed their own freedom, their own egoism, their own richness, and their own power. And by doing so, they will suppress the very people with the freedom they are wanting to giving them. So they're not only giving it in words, they're not giving it in practice. That's in my way to say what I understand that Plato is criticizing and what Socrates is criticizing in the democratic and freedom ideal of freedom. And so they say, well, this cannot hold, and in the end it will falter and it will fall down, and the false gods will fight and will devour the people who are worshiping them in some ways. And so they are trying to build up another notion and saying, well, we have to combine democracy and monarchy. The democratic idea in its basic is not totally false and wrong. And the monarchic idea of one ruler is not wrong, but it's like a kind of finding a balance between them and taking some of them both to uphold both the freedom and the rule of righteousness at the same time. We cannot just have a society building on freedom. It's about also building on what's good and what's beautiful and what's right. And these things are common human values. They are in the nature of humans, Plato will argue. They are not something that are relative and that people will see differently. Yes, sure, they can see beauty in nature in different ways, but it stays the same beauty. It's like things that are beautiful will be seen to the eye as beautiful. Things that's really ugly will be recognized by people as ugly. The same with what's good and what's not good. And that will help people like easily to go under the idea of this one source of values, and they call it the primary story, or the story behind every story. It's like an esoteric background for what they are wanting to build a society in. It's the one idea of one source and one godly order in a way, and we can hear these theocratic notions in this, and the modern anti-democratic states build on conservative ideas of one truth and one king and one society, and righteousness as the way to keep it all together. And so truth, righteousness, and the knowledgeable leader will stand and will build this society on a great balance. And so people will adhere to that because they will adhere to what's righteousness, because it's one and the same. You can accept your position in life if things are right and righteousness, and people are not misusing it. And by having these clever philosophers leading and clever people, you will understand that they are not misusing power, and that's why you will support it. It will be a body that's working together and not working against each other, and you are part of the whole, and the whole is not there for you. So you cannot run away with your egoistic views of liberty and freedom and want to take more and more for yourself under the name of freedom while you are depraving others. So you will have to look at the community, and the rules must also be for the many, and secure them against that kind of authoritarian order. So in that way, they will like get rid of one kind of society and maybe leaning over to some others. It has been interpreted that way anyhow. But maybe it's the balance that's needed. I will comment on all these on the whole book later, but it could look like it's more that communistic, totalitarian community or theocratic community that has evolved from that, or maybe has been put into that as a interpretation of Plato's and Socrates' idea. Maybe what they are wanting is a balance between these two, and to get both notions in praxis, instead of leaning too much on one and neglecting the others, or leaning on the other and neglecting the first one. That could also be read and interpreted from some of their talks. Well, they will also have to limit several liberties in theater and in proclamations and manipulative talks, and they want also to limit the access for foreigners and not really give them a place, because they will not listen to society rules. They will not have the loyalty and so they must be kept in check and not given access to that righteous society. Um, Maybe they can live there, but they cannot have the same power and access. So it's a very clear order that's built on righteousness, and when it's right, people accept it. That's what they say. More than being following your notion of personal freedom, because that cannot be, because you have to adhere to the collective freedom of the many. And so we see that this opposition or opposing idea in Athena itself is a use of freedom. And the problematic side of it is that Socrates gets killed, and Plato was also banished for a long time in his ideas, at least, until, later picked up, especially by the Christian idea and in the Roman Empire, and then later by the Middle Ages, who found these ideas very, very good and in line with God and the one truth and the one society that is the chosen one. And so we got these Platonic ideas, and now maybe societies have left these things and gone back to the notion of freedom and the upholding of it as the basic of life. And so from this chapter of this book, Rune Engelbrecht Larsens, I have just summarized what he's saying about the freedom in Athena and how they tried to build it out as an ideal, and maybe it failed, and that's why we got Plato and Socrates looking into it and saying, listen, this has gone too far, we need something else, and that's the righteousness. And maybe what we need is freedom and righteousness and the balance in between them, but how can that be? And maybe that's what the modern Europe is all about, and modern West has been all about. I'm not sure in these times we're in that if that is if that's really going that way, and maybe things have gone too far and maybe too late to turn back, because the problem is when you have something you are building on and people are getting the benefit of, maybe you cannot turn it around, because those who get the benefit and have the power will be the wolf that will devour every critical voice and every voice who want to turn it around. And so the only way is it will end in revolution, or it will end in a kind of dissolution. It will all go apart somehow, and new nations and new people will take over, or it will, as Plato says, end in tyranny, because democracy feeding the level of freedom-seeking people who cannot get their freedom in total ways will in the end be feeding the few, and these few will feed those around them and grow bigger and richer and use the people's need for freedom to manipulate them into accepting their rule and their expansion of freedom. And you can see the pictures in your head when you follow politics and when you see what's going on in the world and going on in many of the ways that things are being handled. I can see it in the European leaders and politicians and people's feeling of being far away from where things are being decided. We can see it in the United States, and I can see it in the Middle East, both notions, but in a negative direction. So maybe we are in a time where things are negative on both sides, and both ideas need to be put together in a new and positive way. I don't know. We need some prophetic voices. We need some strong leaders to be able to put all that back together. But I can see from reading this, and I could at that time as well, see that, well, democracies are faltering and taking us at a track that could be dangerous and lead to tyranny and lead to the one-man rule in the end anyhow, even though people are voting. And they will lead us to the elite leading everything. So why not go with the righteous leader, the wise leader, and people will accept righteousness more than freedom because they think it's more secure and a better basis. But how can we also prevent what can you say, suppression and prevent tyranny in that type of community? And that's what it has been all about, the struggle and the fight between these two ideas, how to combine them, or the failure to combine them. Well, I'm already too far in my own comments, but this is just to summarize up that Athena has been a light tower, and that it has been tower for freedom of the individual and the security of that, and there has been an opposing force calling for righteousness and the one true godly order, as opposed to the order of the tyranny of the freedom. And so we have these two ideas opposing each other according to this book.